Picture this, you're playing Pavlov VR for fun, maybe doing a little community casting on the side. Fast forward a few years and you're holding up a trophy as the VAIL Major champion, then going on to become an official caster for VRML, the biggest league in VR Esports. That's exactly what happened to my friend YellowHat, and honestly, his story is everything that's exciting about VR right now. We're talking about a space where you can literally go from your living room to
Holy shit.
to the main stage where the community is tight-knit enough that passion and skill can take you anywhere.
That I've been like that close enough to where it's like, hey, like I've actually done something in the realm of VR esports that's like that feels noteworthy.
Here's what really got me. YellowHat didn't just stumble into success, he grinded through every level of VR esports, and now he's the voice calling play-by-plays for some of the most intense VR competitions out there. So if you've ever wondered what it's really like inside the world of VR esports, or you're curious about where this whole scene is heading, stick around. I did not write myself an intro. I was thinking about this in the shower earlier, and I totally forgot to write an intro. Anyways, welcome y'all. My name is Martini. If you're not aware of who I am a VR esports caster and even content creator now as of January. So finally, diving into that. But really, I wanted to start something like this little podcast, kind of showcase my love for VR and really give, I think, a good highlight to a lot of the people that build up the VR community, right? Right now, I always compare it to basically where esports, especially VR esports, where it used to be for normal esports back in like the 2000s, even earlier than that. I'm not fully aware. I was born in 97, so my years can only go so far back. But they're a far cry from where they are now, right? When you think of esports now, people think of those huge prize pools, those $1 million prize pools, those $2 million prize pools, like especially with Fortnite, right? But it takes time to kind of build up to that, and I think a lot of it comes down to community building, and I think that's where we are right now with the VR side of it, with the VR esports side of it, where we're still kind of building up these communities, seeing who has like lasting impacts and seeing what we can do to really just keep things going forward. So I wanted to kind of highlight a lot of people in the community, people I know, and showcase love for the VR community, because all of this is still very much volunteer. I don't know many people getting paid, in these communities. It's very much for the love of the game, right? And I definitely got to say that. But anyways, I wanted to bring on my first guest here. It's going to be YellowHat, one of, someone I know pretty well, not very well, but I think pretty well. We played a variety of times. I mean, we casted together a variety of times. We're on a team together now, which is funny, but it's very much a casual team, I'll say that. It's nothing close to what you have done before in the past. But anyways, I wanted to bring up, for everyone who doesn't know, could you provide us a look into some of the highlights of your time in VR?
Whoa, oh man. So for those that don't know me, I'm YellowHat. I've been playing VR probably for the past 5 years now. I got initially my Valve Index back in 2020. And then, I actually started off with Pavlov VR, one of the greats of the VR FPS world, so to speak. And so I started with my first team, Vortex, in January of 2021, and we competed in season 8 of Pavlov VRML. And I think we got like 5th that season. And then the next season after, season 9, we got 2nd, which was, really awesome. But then this other little game called VAIL came out, and we started grinding that. And lo and behold, in 2022, they announced that they would be doing a LAN tournament in Miami with a $35,000 prize pool split between 4 teams. So first place took home 20K, second place took home 10K, third place got 5K, and then fourth place got nothing. And well, they got the trip. They got the trip and the experience.
Right.
That I would say was probably like the high point of my VR career, so to speak, because my team, we grinded that out and we won the whole entire thing. There was like a whole month of qualifiers before that, and then the top 4 teams did like seeding and everything, and then we all flew out to Miami, and we played on stage in this it was like this art museum. Actually, it was actually kind of interesting, but they had like a whole LAN set up and everything, and we all played on indexes. They rented PCs for the weekend, so it was like as close to a proper LAN that you could possibly get. But we won that, and that was like probably one of the biggest VR esports events, at least on the FPS side of things. I know over in Echo Arena they've done like crazy tournaments, but otherwise,
Right.
for Pavlov Shack, which is the standalone version of Pavlov, I've won a couple of seasons of that. And then there was like there was one X8 tournament that my team won that was like, another 10K prize pool or whatnot. So we got half of that. Yeah, I would say like a lot of my highlights are in Pavlov and Vale. And, I think on the other side of things too, um, I picked up casting with Pavlov because, one of the esports that I love watching is Counter-Strike. I mean, I'm such a Counter-Strike junkie. It's not even funny, but it's one of the most beautiful esports to watch. And just especially when you listen to the casters, like that's something that I would love to do, as I'm staring down the barrel of my 30s. And so, I picked up casting and now I do a lot of casting for Pavlov, for Vale, and for Breachers more so recently. And I even casted Vale and X8 at last year's VRML con. So looking to hopefully do that again this year and see where this whole VR thing takes me.
I remember seeing you at the con, and I was like, "Wait, the YellowHat? That's the YellowHat." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, that's YellowHat!" And it was great to definitely meet you, and definitely exciting. Wait, so when did you start the casting stuff again? I know you had a lot of big highlights there, in terms of your playing career. But can you bring up when you made that transition to being a caster? Why you made that transition?
Well, when I actually like joined VRML in season 8 of Pavlov, I'd actually also like, a few months down the road just picked up casting, like just doing it on my own community channel. I'm like, hey, you know what? I might as well give this a shot, see what happens. And people really, really liked it. They gravitated towards it. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to keep doing this. And, I eventually wound up becoming like an official caster. So I've done many of the championship casts and whatnot for Pav, and then even done some postseason stuff for Vale. But I mean, I picked it up pretty early in like my actual playing career, so I was doing a lot of like playing and casting. So
That's crazy. Did you have any cool standout moments though from casting? Like, did you ever have a game or thing that you would cast it? I think playing's pretty obvious, right? You had your title, right? You can't really beat something like that. But what about casting? Did you ever have a moment that was a standout moment? You're like, well, you know what? This is why I'm doing this.
um, I think there's been a few times. I'm trying to remember a very specific time. I mean, it's funny because I do have a lot of just clips on my Twitch where I did a lot of my casting of like, really like insane moments, like one dude just like getting a miraculous 4K on like a save round with a hunting rifle, and I was maybe a little plastered, and I'm just losing my absolute shit. And it's like it's just one of the most iconic clips. And then there was another one where I was casting with a few friends. We just did like an afternoon cast just for, shits and giggles or whatnot. And they just like bombard the site with smokes and we're just absolutely losing it. And I'm like, man, it's just like these little funny moments that is exactly why I do it. Cause it's like, we do it for the community at the end of the day, right? Like, I'm not trying to like put us on a high horse or anything, but like so much like but with casting, it's like I feel like that's where I'm helping the community grow because that's how we, outreach to people who maybe haven't, picked up the total interest in VR esports and want to see what it's all about.
No, I totally understand it. I mean, myself being a caster, I know we kind of are like vibe checkers, or not vibe checkers, but like we help curate the vibe, I think, for that specific community, right? I think I always think of people like Palador. He's such a big a person in the Echo
Mhm.
Arena community, and he was, very granted he put a lot of hours in, that's partly it, but he was kind of a
Mhm.
standout personality, and people really enjoyed seeing stuff like that, right? So casters, to your point, I don't want to put us
Mhm.
on a pedestal, but I've seen it so many times. You go in a game, right, and people recognize you and they love that, and you get so much love too when you like cast so many different teams, and I think it's so fun to see that sort of stuff, right? You don't see it too often.
Mhm.
I think when you're just playing a game normally, and that's about it. But I think for VR esports, it's a great way to inject personality into your
Mhm.
community, and not be so stressful. Because I can definitely vouch for the fact of, being a captain myself of a team, being a player. It's stressful being in a competitive community, right? Like it's hard not to crash out. Honestly, it's right. You're constantly. I feel like, especially as a team captain, you're constantly
Mhm.
trying to
Oh my god.
not let your team crash out from things happening or too much stress going on, too
Yeah.
much pressure, whatever. Especially when you're going for things like titles, right? Those are such high pressure
Mhm.
moments where any minor mistake really can cost you a title, and it's hard not to crash out. based off of like some small thing that you're doing, right? So I love hearing that from you. I love hearing other casters enjoying one the part of casting, but also I think being understanding of where they stand in the
Mhm.
community, right? You're gonna have a voice in the community and a more prominent face, right, than just some normal player, right? The only way to get prominent in the community if you're not a
Right.
caster is you got to be some cracked player or someone who's just a standout personality, right? Or someone that's like content creation, that sort of stuff.
And I think that really that's just like a mantra for like streaming and doing content creation in general. Like there's two types of people. I think it was maybe Summit 1G who said this or whatnot, but there's two types of people that people want to watch. You either have to be like stupidly cracked at a game, right? Like you're watching like Shroud or like you're watching like a pro player or whatnot, and so that you're like learning how to play the game at like a stupid high level. Or you just gotta be, like, insanely funny, like, you're talking like a Tim the Tap Man personality or just, like, a group of people who are just, like, constantly, like, making jokes at each other, and it's just, like, pure banter, but it's, like, those 2 types of personalities, that's really what succeeds, and I think, you know, as a caster, you have that opportunity to, bring the more lighthearted side to the community, and then on top of that, like, our jobs at the end of the day is to tell the story of the community because people really gravitate towards narrative. They want to know like where did this player grow up? What games they start playing, like, what got them into VR, what got them competing at such a high level, and being able to tell the story of individual players and then teams themselves, like that's something that is such a great opportunity, and especially as this thing grows, like that's what's going to help propel the esport forward, I think.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about beginnings, right? I was snooping around. I'm not gonna lie. I was looking around on your YouTube. I saw you. I didn't realize what kind of content you'd put out, but I was snooping around. I saw you did some old podcasts too, that go back 3 or 4 years. YellowHat, and it's funny. I'm so used to gamer tags, and I don't think about it too much, right? Even mine, like it originates back when I was a child, when I ended up making that, but. Yeah, it goes my so I guess if I'm gonna I was about to ask you about your lore, but let's trade lore for lore. Funny enough, my gamer tag came from I don't know if you remember this game. It was called RuneScape. This that old school MMO on the browser, when it was a common thing. And I remember signing up for the first time, and that was the first time I had ever been prompted, "What is your username?" for like a gamer tag, and I just didn't know what to do. But the thing is, so it's already been exposed, but my real name is Martin. And I wanted something similar to that. And I remember as a child, I don't know where I heard it, but I heard the cocktail martini, a variety of times, maybe from a movie or whatever. And I didn't know I was a child. I didn't know how to spell it, but I was like, oh, that sounds so cool. Let me write that down. So I wrote it down in the best way that I thought I could interpret it, and it came out as Martini, like Martiney. Then I put like underscore later to like kind of make it individual because some people already had that username, whatever. Um, but I made it because I just liked the word martini as a child, and it's stuck with me since then because I liked it as a gamer tag. It was close enough to my real name, so it wasn't weird, but it was still a gamer tag, right? If someone read it without knowing my real name, they wouldn't actually know my name is Martin, right? Sometimes it makes me laugh because I almost anticipate people know that's my real name, but there have been a handful of times where people just cannot, deduce the two. And I love hearing the different pronunciations. I've heard like maternity before where they just kind of butchered it so bad. That's the worst one I've seen. I think it was like Nightfire. He used to call me like Martine. So it's funny to hear people's pronunciations, and I'm like, it's a lot simpler than you think it is. It purely is that cocktail. But anyways, that is my gamer tag lore. I actually wanted to bring up yours because I think you had highlighted it in one of your podcasts, and I think it's a beautiful story how you did it. If you like to talk about how you got to become YellowHat.
So yeah, the yellow hat. So I did actually, so it was in my Q&A video that I like dropped the whole lore and whatnot. So we actually have two of these, funny enough. And so, they're originally from my grandfather. He was very much a hat person. He had so many like trucker hats and everything and yada yada yada. So um this is probably when I was in like uh second grade, so we're talking like 2003.
That's a
I'm
throwback.
very much in awe. Right, like you're talking like Halo 2's not even out yet. But they're clearing out their house because we're putting an addition on our house because they're moving in and whatnot. And so my parents are like, do you want this hat or whatnot? I'm like, no, I'm not really a hat person, whatever. So I grew up with two older brothers and an older sister. And so my oldest brother's like, yeah, I'll take the hat, whichever. And so he very much made this like a thing because he was in high school at that point. And so, he played football, he did track and everything. And then his senior year, I think it was either his junior year going into senior year or his senior year. Um, he was at football practice or whatnot and got tackled in the back of the knee and tore his ACL, so he's just done for the season. Not a very fun injury, but that didn't stop him from going to all the women's soccer games. And so he'd show up with this like giant ass drum and just be obnoxious, but like cheering on everybody, and like he would basically be leading the chants and everything. So, if you saw this hat in the crowd, that like there was about to be like major positive vibes and everything, and like there's about to be a lot of energy. So, trying to figure out how to say this without completely killing the
You're good.
but yeah, the short of it is, so I was 10 years old, soon to be 11, and it's like the first or second Wednesday of 2007, and things are a little bit different because I had like some after school program or whatnot, and then I like get picked up by my aunt. I'm like, why are you here on a Wednesday? Like, what's going on? And then the long story short of it is, so my old man brings me up into his room and he's like, hey, so your brother got into a car wreck today and he is no longer with us. And to process it as like a 10-year-old is kind of weird because you have some like understanding of the world and everything, but like that was just like a major like, what the fuck? Like there's not like a way that you can even think about like, you know, you just lost like one of your siblings and now you're about to have to grow up with that experience and a completely changed family dynamic and everything. Now, like it's it's not like, like I've dealt with like parents splitting up or like, being in like a foster home or, and I know so many people in this community that have dealt with that have dealt with like, divorced parents, missing parents, like, maybe even like abusive parents or just like really a struggle in like home life and everything. And like I definitely, sympathize with that and whatnot, because no kid deserves to deal with that at the end of the day. So, you know, that happened and a lot kind of changed, and it's weird. So when you like, especially like when you're a kid, if you lose a sibling, if you ever have to unfortunately go through that experience, like, you know, you or any just like traumatic thing or whatever, like a lot of people start being really nice to you, because they like feel bad and whatnot. But it's like, you do wonder like if some people are genuine, some people are not, whichever. But even then, it's like, you know, for the first time, it felt like a decent amount of people actually liked me. Like, I wasn't like necessarily like the popular kid growing up or whatnot, but people eventually like had respect and whatnot. But I kind of going off on a tangent, but essentially, so that happened, and it was kind of just like this complete shift in everything. And so, I mean, my two older brothers and I mean, we grew up playing video games together and stuff, and you know, I'm talking like the one of the most memorable ones. You ever play like the old Need for Speed games?
Yeah, I was into a couple different driving games. I think there's like Burnout was the one.
Burnout,
Yeah.
yeah, dude. Burnout.
That's a throwback, man. Gaming throwbacks, dude.
Mhm.
Sorry,
Oh,
keep
dude,
going, keep
we'll
going.
have a lot of those. But yeah, no. So, we played the old Need for Speed games together, and like we would always trade off. So, like my oldest brother who passed away would do the drag races. My other brother, he would do like the lap races. I'd always do like the point to points or whichever. But like that's just one of those things that I held on to, and especially like um as I move on and, as I'm, nearly 20 years past the experience, which is insane to think about anyways, like just trying to hold on to whatever memories you can, because again, like I was 10. It's not like I'm holding on to a lot of memories there, but it's like, especially like my dad bringing me up the stairs and everything and telling me the news, like I can vividly remember that. But anyways, so with how he was with like leading chants and whatnot, and how he's always trying to include people in whichever, and just generally being a positive force, I'd always seen like the yellow hat as kind of like a symbol of like leadership and kindness and everything. But when my other brother and I were making our gamer tag on Xbox Live, because we didn't even like have Xbox Live until probably like 2000, like after 2007, like midway through. um we were trying to come up with a name, and then we just came up with Yellow Hat and then 07 for the year that that it happened, and then B, the year that we made the gamer tag in the first place. So I've never changed my gamer tag since. I've never changed from being Yellow Hat. I haven't like changed my name and then whatnot. It's always been Yellow Hat, and it's pretty much gonna stay like that for eternity.
Wait, so were you sharing the gamer tag with your brother then,
Yeah,
or it
for a
was
little bit. And
yours? Okay.
for this, we made it after my oldest brother passed, so it was kind of like in memoriam to him too anyways. But I think like my other brother, who's 4 years older than me, um like he played for a little bit. I mean, we got like my intro into the FPS world online was Call of Duty 4 and Halo 3, the two greatest FPSs, probably two of the greatest console FPSs made of all time. I will stand on that hill and die on that hill. But he played a little bit of Halo 3, and then, my older brother, like he got busy, went off to college to whichever, so he didn't have a lot of time to like really game or whatever. And so I just kind of picked up that hobby a little bit more, especially with the whole online thing. And it's always stuck. It's funny because I used to have friends who like, you know, I played a lot of Call of Duty, especially like 2007 to 2012, 2013. And I'm not sure if you remember what game battles were. It's basically like, okay, so game battles that was like how you got into like the MLG circuit and everything. And like you could do like, I never did like wager matches or anything, but you would do like 2v2, 3v3 scrims and matches and whatnot. And, you try to get on a leaderboard or whatnot. That was like how you basically got into it back in the day. And, they were always like, oh, you got to change your date.
Like the competitive scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
you're trying to get in the competitive scene back then, even back then. Well, okay, okay.
I mean, like we never did it like super. I think the hardest we went was probably like MW3, but it's not like we did anything like majorly crazy. It's not like I was playing with like Scump or like any of these legends you see in the Call of Duty scene today. But um, you know,
You know what? No, I gotta give like a shout out to that because I know even myself like I played VRML. It's not like I got to a master tier. I think people forget when you get there is a difference, right? When you go from just casual to like ranked play or competitive play that the game has, but they go from there to then take it a step further and go into the competitive communities. That takes a whole nother level of engagement and effort. And honestly, I always got to give kudos to those players that not everyone's gonna become top of the world, right? But you are in that community, and I think that's something I always kind of like give a shout out to, right? Because there's a lot more people out there than I thought there'd be. The other day I was at a party, I ran into a guy. He said, "Yeah, I actually used to play in tournaments for like Fortnite." And I'm like, "Oh, that's crazy!" Like I love meeting esports players because it's a tight community. There's only one esports in general is already tight, and then VR esports, right? That's even tighter. So it's always great to see people in those communities.
I think too it goes to the collective fact that even we're talking 20, 25 years ago, like nobody ever thought like gaming was going to be a full-time career. I mean, 25 years ago you're talking about people playing like maybe like StarCraft and 1.6 like Counter-Strike, and it's like they're playing on teams, they're playing tournaments, but it's not like this is like also pre-YouTube era, right? Like you couldn't make a career online like you can today. Like that's especially the biggest shift that happened from the early 2000, the early 2000s to the 2010s. I mean, you started having stuff like Twitch and YouTube and you're talking about like Vine and Twitter and everything, and like all these avenues that you have to be successful and have a career online. But like, back then it's like, you know, you were lucky to find out how to even like get involved with the competitive scene. I mean, it's definitely become way easier. And I think to tie it back all into the VR esports scene, I think VR esports is nice because as long as you have a headset and you have a like decent amount of skill, like it's getting to the point where like, maybe 10 years down the road, maybe it could be something that you can do as a career. Who knows? I would love to see it that way, but for right now, I mean, because it's like I would say like maybe semi-pro, maybe
Yeah.
like, just like decently high level. Like nobody's doing it for like a salary or anything, right? Like that isn't a thing right now, which like all of us want that, you know what I mean? Like everybody would want that opportunity. And like I'm blessed enough with like having played in the VAIL Major and everything, and like having played a couple of these other like larger VR FPS tournaments, that I've been like that close enough to where it's like, hey, like I've actually done something in the realm of VR esports that's like that feels noteworthy. And sure, it's not just about the money either, but like I think especially with Vale, like that was like one of the first few showcases of like, hey, this whole VR thing and the whole VR esports thing, this could be a legitimate thing that people gravitate towards. And you had stuff like Oculus Connect in 2018 with Onward, and you had stuff like VRML that's going to continue to be a thing. And maybe some other tourney organizer comes up and says, hey, we're going to also do like a LAN or something, you know what I mean? But I think having that opportunity to be kind of in the spotlight of VR esports is something that I've definitely appreciated for sure, because it's nice to have that. Like, it was kind of our way too of like trying to push VR esports to the front and be like, hey, there's this whole cool, like, it's very niche, but it's this cool thing that you can do. Like, this is what it's all about.
So being in VR now for I think you said what 5 6 years, so a good handful of
But yeah,
years.
5 5 years.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How do you feel about the growth it's had, and where it's currently heading? Are you happy about it? Do you want something else to be happening in the VR space? Is it missing? Is it missing what you think it could be doing instead?
So I would say that when I joined VR, it was like when I started playing VR, it was very much in the height of the PC VR era, right? I mean, I think back to like I'll take Pavlov as a prime example because that's where I started. Like 2021 and 2020 were, I mean, granted because everybody was stuck inside because COVID, but um that was like the peak years for PC VR in general because it's very easy to make content. It's very high quality. Like there's so much that you can do with it. And I mean, you're talking like the end of 2021 going into 2022, like Pav had like 2,000 concurrent players on Steam, which if you talk PC VR numbers in general, like just for a PC VR game, that's insane. You look at PC VR numbers now, most VR FPSs are in like the double digits, maybe lucky to be in the triple digits, because the market has most certainly shifted from PC VR over to standalone. And I I'm not like upset about it being standalone focused now. I know some people definitely are, but like I think standalone has introduced VR to like a whole new generation of VR players, and it's going to continue to do that. Um, Especially like with the Quest 2 and the Quest 3 and everything, like both those headsets have, there's so many people that wouldn't be playing VR right now if those VR headsets didn't exist, right? Because it's so much easier to get into VR in the first place by just having a headset you can literally just turn on and play. You don't have to set up like anything. Whereas PC VR, it's like, oh hey, you gotta make sure your base stations are working. You gotta have a really high end PC to like not have like really crap frames. And oh hey, the best PC VR headset that has been made is now 6 years old, which is insane to think about because I still think that the Index is one of the best PC VR headsets, even though like the resolution is not as good as like the Quest 3 is nowadays. But man, that what I mean, I'm fortunate that I even got to play on that headset. You know, I could have started out on like an HTC Vive or like a Rift or something, you know what I mean? But I think in terms of like where VR is headed, you know, it's part of it may be a little bit trapped by, you know, technology and everything and just, you know, mobile technology and whatnot. Um, and I hope to see some more competitors to Meta, but like at the same time, I will say that standalone has definitely introduced it to a lot more people, and you know, I hope to see both mediums grow, like both PC VR and standalone. But we need some PC VR hardware, man.
I, you
Like,
know, I
we really do.
I I'm more of the mind that I like standalone more, right? Whenever I play PCVR when I'm wired, it does inherently feel different, right? And to your point, it's harder. The accessibility is a lot lower, right? But even for me, I started on the Quest 2. That's what I started. So I'm not even that old in terms of like playing VR games. But I was able to just pop on the headset and start playing, and I had done that for I think about 2 3 years before I even got my own gaming PC to finally, even try out PC gaming, right? And to your point, you need. Uh, I think one of the biggest hurdles on, funny enough, is not even the hardware, but it's just space, right? Having space is one of the hardest things for VR. Having good internet is hard enough for VR. And then finally, then you start talking about headsets. Do you have the money to finally get a headset? A headset alone, right, to get a for VR, and then if you want to do PC VR, do you have enough money to get a PC that's ready for VR? And now you're stacking on several thousand at this, like, at least up to $1,000, if not more, depending on how well your PC setup is, and even if you had to do anything extra for your rooms, right? And that's something like space is such a big deal, and I think that's the hardest. That's one of the harder things with VR, and then also the headset too, the comfort, right? I've had times where before I get a lot of the third party stuff, where sometimes a headset kind of gives me a headache. And who wants to play a game that literally gives you a headache within an hour of playing it? When you can literally just go to your PlayStation, Xbox, PC and play that for 8 hours and barely get a headache. And that's mostly because you didn't drink enough water, right? It's not even like the headset, like it's not like the computer itself is causing those sort of headaches. So I think there's still so many hurdles, and I think standalone does its best at removing those hurdles. But you're right. Standalone also puts it in a weird box because I think the biggest thing, there's another problem, right? People expect high quality because of 4K gaming and everything now. So when they put on, I've heard this time and time again, they put on a standalone headset and they're like, whoa, it looks like PS2 graphics. And there's a part of me that has to be just like, you're right, but you have to get over it for the time being, right? Like imagine being around the PS2 era and you're like, oh, these graphics could be better. Like you could always say that about any newer technology. I think it's just harder for VR because there's a direct comparison. Because for PS2 graphics, what are you comparing that to? Like older things. People didn't know any better yet, but people do know better now because of where normal gaming has gone in terms of graphical fidelity and everything. But unfortunately, I think people forget VR is actually requires, I think, more hardware because I think doesn't it need like twice as many pixels because you're like,
Yeah, you're rendering the screen twice. You're rendering the game twice, and the fact that you can even do that on a mobile chipset in the first place is insane to think about, right? Um, and then it's funny because another thing that I've done in like the VR space recently is make a map, like make a like an FPS level or whatnot for like the Pavlov chat community, and trying to like optimize that for a mobile headset. It's difficult because I mean, like the game engine that you're in, it'll tell you like, oh, you're actually using this many triangles, when it's really like, oh, hey, you're actually using double that amount of triangles, so cut down on that. And I think another great point that you bring up is space, and I think one of the hardest parts of VR, you see, so like there's a lot of kids that play it, obviously. You get to 18 and you go to college, there is a sharp drop off because you don't have space to play in a dorm room. You don't have space. Like, there's not, you're probably sharing a dorm with somebody else. Probably like, not even like 15 feet wide or whatnot. Like, you don't have,
yeah, you would need to like play in the common room or something, right?
yeah. And who wants to do that? or like if your school has like a gaming area, I mean, like my school that I went to, which is University of Delaware, they built an esports arena after I graduated.
That's actually kind of cool though.
Yeah. Um, and but I mean, the thing is, like, you don't have the space, and so you will see a lot of like, when kids turn 18, like they just stop playing VR for a while because they don't have the space. Like, yeah, maybe when they come home for winter break, they'll play VR for a little bit, but otherwise, it's like you have that sharp drop off, and then it's like after college, it starts to pick up, but like by that point, you're an adult. It's like I just want to play with other adults. I don't really want to like play with.
That is an interesting thing you bring up. I do feel like now that I'm thinking about it, in the VR community, I definitely see these two big groups, right? It's the really young kids. It's from like technically, let's say 13, because that's what technically they're supposed to be. But 13 till what, 17, 18. And then you're right, it's kind of a weird gap there. I don't see it as much because I mean we're casters, so I've definitely seen like Bob's a good example, right? He's like 20, 21. I think Chum's another example, people that are in that kind of age group. And then you're right, it kind of tends to skew older at some point, and it kind of just fills out for the rest, right? People that have the space, the time, and the money to try out VR stuff. And I think a lot of it for the older community ends up people that are already enthusiasts, right? To convince a adult to spend their hard-earned money on something that isn't a confirmed console, right? Like telling them to buy a PS5 or PS6 or whatever upgrade is easy because they've played in the PlayStation or Xbox or PC environment. They know they need to make those upgrades over time anyways. But to tell them to buy a whole new console that they've never really played and it plays very differently than anything they've ever played before, that's a hard sell, honestly. So I feel like you end up seeing a lot more kids entering VR first versus adults entering VR first for the first time.
Because they also have the free time too, right? Like what you come home, like I remember being in high school, like what I came home and I played Black Ops 2 all day. Like that's all I did. I did my homework, obviously. I tried to be a diligent student, keyword tried. And like, they have all the free time in the world where it's like you're an adult, it's like, hey, you got to have a job, you got to pay taxes, you got to make sure that like rent's on time, like, you don't have like the 6 hours a day to play VR or whatnot. And even then it's like, again, because it's a different medium too, right? Especially with like, I started playing VR after I was done with college. The first time I played VR was when I was in grad school, and a buddy of mine had an HTC Vive, and he was like, "You should come over and try this." I'm like, "Okay, I've never tried VR before. I definitely want to." Dude, I was at his place until 2 o'clock in the morning playing H3 VR. Like, I was like, "Oh my god, I need a fucking headset now." Like,
Dude, I think the first time I touched VR, it was similar. I went over to a friend's spot. I think it was either an Index or a Rift or whatever, but one of those things that has like stations. It had like 3 or 4 stations, and it was like Gorn or whatever, that weird game where like you fight in an arena, and it's like very, very gory. But I spent 3 or 4 hours there, and like you don't notice it because you're in VR, you're in a different space. And then at one point, I'm like playing, and someone taps me on the shoulder, and it's like his girlfriend. He's like, "Hey, you've been playing for a long time. Do you want to go home?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness!" I didn't realize how long I'd been playing VR at that point. And I think that's one of the funny things about VR. Sometimes you just like get in the zone, and you truly are in a different reality. Like I sometimes wish I could get phone notifications like set up easily, so I can just be aware of time. Otherwise, when you're in there, you're just kind of gone until like there's some hard stop from either your friends are done playing, or you feel the tiredness, or the battery. Honestly, the battery is such a good thing at like telling you, hey, like you've been playing for a while, get off. Like,
and I think, what's funny? I think especially like if you ever got the opportunity to play on stage, that's one of the better things about playing VR on stage in an esports setting versus playing like flat screen, is you're just so locked into the environment itself. Like it's very it's very easy to tune out the crowd. You're not looking at the crowd, you're not seeing the crowd. Like that was something that like definitely was a little shocking about the VAIL Major, and I know I keep going back to that, but we had like the professional grade like soundproofing headphones that you see at like any esport event, and like you could hardly hear the crowd. Like maybe you like felt it a little bit more, just with like people applauding or whatnot, but you could hardly hear anything. And then with the headset on, it's just like you are solely focused on the game. And that's like one of the highest levels of like immersion that you could ever feel. And to the point of battery, the funny like it's crazy because it's like you'll try to find workarounds for that too. Like, I have two Bobo VR battery packs. So like I could just put two. I could just play infinitely. Like it's like, oh, this one's dead. All right, let me do this one, and then I'm gonna plug this other one in. So like, if I want to play, like if I'm just really feeling it and I
Two,
want to play for a
two.
few hours, I'll just do that. Or like, I remember, I think the longest time I stayed in VR, like pretty much straight, was like 12 hours, and yeah. So, and I know some people have done 24 hours, which is insane. Some people I know have even done 40.
That's I feel like so I gave myself I think a battery headset like a battery pack but one, and I think I've stopped myself at that hard stop, so it gives me like 4 to 5 maybe even 6 hours of
Mhm.
gameplay, and I think to me that's sufficient because honestly when I do play 5 6 hours of straight gameplay, and I will say this, I still have a workaround. I have another backup battery just in case I need it, but I try not to use it. But the thing is 5 6 hours in your body starts feeling it, and I think that is one of the
Mhm.
downsides. I will say, like, you are physically
You're
more
exerting yourself more.
actually exerting physical exertion there. Like you're gonna feel it after a good amount of time, and that's a cool appeal that changes, I'm gonna be honest, what esports means, because to me VR esports I would argue is more sports like than normal esports, because they kind of, I would say this is flat gaming. They're kind of just staring at the screen. I'm not gonna say that it's not nothing, because it's kind of like chess, right? Chess still you're burning calories, you're doing a lot of things, even if you're so focused. But it is different because now you're doing the same level of focus, but you're also now physically moving and having to do these things and these mechanical things that you can't quite do in normal esports, right?
I would say you're definitely like you're involving more of your body, right? Like, you're when you're playing like an FPS or whatnot, like you've got your mouse hand, you've got your keyboard hand. So like this, your left hand, your keyboard hand is not really moving, and it's not like you're actually like moving physically in the play space as much intentionally. Like, and like say if I'm like trying to duck behind cover, like, oh, I actually have to crouch, which at 29, that's gonna be freaking hard. Um, Instead of just like literally pressing a button or whatnot. But I mean, I think this, for a lot of these esports, it's the same level of like mental focus too, of like, all right, you're trying to think about where everybody's on the map, trying to figure out how to like anti-strat people, trying to like make sure that your own strats go well, and then focus on your own individual play. So it's like VR definitely, like I would say, involves yourself a little bit more. But especially again, just being a Counter-Strike fan too. I mean, there's just like so many like high level things that that esport or any other esport honestly like provides. And I'm waiting for VR to get to that point where like people are doing this for their livelihoods, and you're dedicating the actual proper like 8 hours a day. And I mean, it's crazy, like if you just dedicated 8 hours a day to playing VR, like you could be insanely good in such a short amount of time, just because you're playing so much more than many other people are playing. But like it's also kind of like a cost analysis too, of like, can you spend 8 hours in VR in a day? Like it's
Yeah,
a
and I
lot.
will say, like, I think the coolest thing I've noticed a lot is that fatigue and stress is a lot more noticeable in VR. I think one of the funniest things as a caster is when you go to that first person, like, POV, and you can just physically see someone's hands shaking while, like, at least with breachers, you can physically see it shaking as they're getting ready to shoot someone else. And, like, that is something that's so crazy that you can kind of see that sort of thing. Or fatigue finally sets in because they've been going for like 8 rounds, right? That sort of stuff matters a lot more, and it's so cool to see that sort of thing, and it's just a really cool highlight about how VR is different as a medium. You know what I mean? Anyways, I wanted to bring up another question. I was curious, right? So you've been in the VR space for 5 years. You played a good amount of gaming and other stuff. Why focus so much though on VR? Like you had that initial time with your friend that showcased how cool VR is, and you tried it out, I'm assuming, afterwards. But what keeps you around? Why, you know, VR is kind of a lot, right? It's such a small community. It requires a lot out of us to really build into the community. And I'm not gonna say you don't get anything back because people are great, and I love talking to the community, and you get so much love from people. But there's no financial gain right now. What? what keeps you here? What keeps you around?
I think it goes to that point of community. I mean, like, I joined the Pavlov community in 2020, and there was just so many like cool and awesome people there. And that was like my first foray into like actually grinding with a team to get better. And, that was something I really latched onto. And especially the fact that like, that team was like pretty much all adults, which is awesome too, because it's like, oh, these are people around my age that are like-minded and want to improve at something. And VR was just kind of a hobby. And then it's like, oh, hey, I can do all these really cool things. Like, I can do like, I can play, I can cast. I've learned Unreal Engine now in order to make maps. Now I've got, now I'm kind of doing VR as like a part-time, like actual job on the side of like my, main job, which I work in a completely different field. But, I do QA testing for a VR studio, and that's like a part-time thing. So it's like kind of evolved over the years. But I think what's kept me around, especially, is because the community is small at this point. Like it's very easy to like just meet people all over, and like um I've worked with some VR YouTubers and whatnot, and it's been a really awesome experience getting to, meet people up in the scene and whatnot. I mean, there was one dude named Awakened Toast who, few 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. I got to play some Contractor Showdown with him, and we had a blast, and we were like pretty like-minded because it's his interests are like actually pretty similar to mine. It's like we both like Call of Duty, we both love Counter-Strike, and we both love Pokemon. So like we just vibe together while playing Showdown, and that was awesome. And I think there's like plenty of other people that I got to meet, and you know I I think it's just awesome, like, because it's a smaller community, like, everybody kinda knows everybody, and, it's also been so welcoming too, and especially with VR being a relatively new experience too, I think we're all kinda in the mindset of, "This thing's gonna blow up, let's be the driving force that helps it to blow up in the first place." So, I think that's definitely what has kept me around, and then also just because, like, there's some VR games that are awesome. Like, I've enjoyed my fair share of Pav and, Breachers and Veil. And, I remember, like, in the beginning of 2022, do you remember Zenith: The Last City? You ever play that game?
Yeah, I didn't play it myself, but I remember hearing so much. There's so much hype behind it, and I think it kind of died down because the
So
problem came there wasn't enough content to sustain, right, for
so
a
the
while.
first month of that game was awesome. It was just I want another. I'm at the point where I'm like, I should learn game dev because I wanna make another VR MMO. I think I feel like VR kinda needs that. It's also hard because it's like, it's so much grinding too, and it's like, VR already being an exhausting medium, like, that's kinda hard to justify. But man, like, I would do anything just to go back to that month of playing Zenith and just grinding. Dude, because MMOs are addicting, man.
Dude,
Like
I don't know. I got over MMOs like after RuneScape. I used to do like Nabinogi, Maple Story back
Mhm,
in the day, like some old school ones.
mhm,
I enjoyed it too much, and you're right. It takes so much time. There's a lot of grinding, and I hate to say it, like I kind of like more progression from other stuff, like even COD. Like
mhm.
honestly, if you like really put in the hours, you probably progress and get a lot of the things within a couple months time. MMOs sometimes, bro, I
Yeah,
swear you're going for months, maybe years, and you don't even have the
yeah.
full array of all the content. It just takes so much time out of it. But funny enough, we talked about community, and I think that's one of the coolest things about VR. I feel like the social aspect is unbeatable, right?
Mhm,
To be able to go in, and that's why I'm
mhm.
shocked sometimes when people are toxic, right? I feel like to be able to go in and look and truly look at something with your own eyes. I know like flat gaming you kind of do that, but like to look at something, move your head around and feel immersed in a space, it's different to talk to someone in there. It's different to be able to high five them. I love that thing from Rec Room, being able to high five them, do little cool actions that truly feel like you are in real life with them. I think that's one of the best aspects of VR is kind of bridging the social connection that people are honestly kind of losing nowadays. I think where everything's kind of more and more online, people don't connect as well in person. We're losing these things called like third places, they call it, where a place that people can go to and just kind of hang out and meet people. VR kind of allows you to have that new third space. That's what social media even does. But it's different, right? To be able to hop on, just talk to people in person, and it's one of the things I love when you see these social games. Like, I don't play VR chat too much. I know it gets a lot of hate for a lot of things, but
Right.
the social
But
aspect, there's a reason why it's big, right? The social aspect's great. I think even Gorilla Tag kind of touched on that, and I think that's what Orion Drift's trying to build
Mhm.
on, is the social aspect of being able to just hop into a space and just kind of hang out with people.
And that's like it's crazy because it's like you look at like I think about like the most because Pavlov has user generated content so people can make their own game modes and custom maps and everything. The ones that have been the most successful are the ones that focus around social aspects. So like the RP game modes and whatnot. My a good friend of mine made basically like a faster paced Tarkov mode in Pavlov and it's called Resurgence, but you spawn in and there's like a spawn room, and half the time people are just chilling there shooting the shit. Or like even like breachers, like being able to play on the basketball court and whatnot and just talk with the other team. Like it's just that I think really kind of elevates it and whatnot. And I think with like VR chat and everything too, like yeah, sure, a lot of people give it flack or whatnot, but for a lot of people that socializing in real life may be not the easiest thing for them, especially for those that are dealing with, that are, like autistic or, have like social anxiety disorders or whatnot. Like it allows them to be in a more comfortable space to actually try and socialize. And I think that's something that is, really, really awesome is, and I mean, I don't have a lot of hours in VR chat and whatnot, but there's some people that, they sleep in VR chat. They're on that like 8 hours a day, but I mean, if it makes you comfortable, if it makes you happy and it doesn't get in the way of life, cool, go for it. You know what I mean? And again, I mean, just the fact that it allows the ease of, social experience and everything, I think that's just something that really makes VR just in general like awesome.
Yeah, and I totally feel that. Like, the social aspect, I think, is again one of the unbeatable, and I think it weaves so well into that community thing that we had talked about earlier, where the thing that keeps us around. I mean, community definitely one of the big things. I thought the other day, because I'm trying to get better at doing things IRL. I'm not gonna lie, but I thought the other day, like, even with me not doing too many things, or Sam, it's a busy week. I never feel lonely. It sounds weird to say that. I never feel lonely, but it's because I'm always talking to like somebody, right? In terms of gaming, I'm either online gaming with some of my like bros back home. I'm talking to you guys in the VR community. I'm doing something on CAS. I'm doing XYZ. Like, I'm always honestly in contact with somebody, and I think that's one of the coolest things. Having these inbuilt communities does for VR and for us really for a while. We'll see how that goes. But I'm kind of curious. You mentioned you might have another YellowHat. Did I hear that right? Do you have multiple YellowHats, or is it a single YellowHat you've always had?
There is a second one. So the other one is the one that my brother actually wore. So we keep that in like kind of like a basket or whatnot. And it's like way less cleaner than this one is. Like this one's still pretty clean. I know I've kind of got camera blur on, but it's not like, it's like dirty or disgusting or anything. But yeah, I realized that like way, way, way later. I'm like, oh, we actually have two of them. I thought, this was the one, but
Wait, so is that the same one you've been using all these years? Like, have you ever wanted to upgrade the hat? Is that a thing?
no. Where are you gonna find like I mean, you could probably find one anywheres, but like even then it's just like the fact that this one was like passed down from family, like I think that's just also another thing. I'm like, the hat works. If it ain't broke, why fix it?
So, we're going to start coming to an ending here. I guess one of the last things I wanted to think of is kind of going forward in VR. Is there anything you specifically are hoping to see, whether it's VR esports? How about this? Is there anything in VR esports you're hoping to see? And at a broader level, is there something you still are hoping to see in VR?
I think I would like to see a lot of the content continue to evolve. And I think once I remember hearing this from over like the GTA. I know I'm like going all over the place, but I remember hearing this over in the GTA RP, community. But like one thing that was said was like when GTA RP blew up, it's because the content was ready, right? And a lot of us in the VR space, like, it's not like we came into it as like big old YouTubers. Like, it's not like we were like Swagger Souls or Josh Dub, which is how a lot of kids hear about TTT and VR and everything. But so we have a unique opportunity in that we are the first ones that get to really create content and set the standard for what VR content should look like. And so, especially like, I'm hoping that VR content continues to improve. And I mean, and there's literal companies that are dedicated to helping that. I know one of them I almost, I even interviewed with and almost worked for was they're called Live. I'm sure you're aware of Live. Are you? Maybe? LIV. But yeah, they basically have like camera stabilization software. They can allow you to like swap to like
Oh,
third
oh
person.
wait. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay, okay. Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. So yeah, I almost worked for them and like they're doing a lot of really good work with like helping VR creators make better content and whatnot. And I think especially once that content is there and once like, once more people get into the medium, like it's just gonna skyrocket and maybe we'll see like a Ready Player One situation in the next 10, 20 years. It's funny because we keep saying that, but like soon enough that might be actuality with where like everything is going with like augmented reality and everything. But you know, it's really I'm hoping to see just the content continue to grow, and I think especially like after VRML that's what I want to start focusing on more again is just making content because I've taken a long break from content. Let's be real.
I saw.
2024 I had to get my
Going,
life
it's funny
together in
snooping through
24.
someone's socials. I'm like, oh my goodness. I didn't. Funny enough, in the time I had known you, I didn't realize you were a content creator. I just always knew you as like a player and caster. So it's cool to see that. It's cool. I have a lot of love for content creators because now that I started getting into it, it's a pain in the butt, man. Like it's not easy, right? Like you gotta really put in the hours and learn how to cut things together. Yeah.
The hardest thing is being consistent, and even somebody who does it full time, like they're still going to struggle with it. It's very, very hard because you know you're not just like putting videos out for the sake of putting videos out. Like you're trying to entertain a whole community of people who are there for you and your content. And like I I feel bad for having not uploaded it forever because it almost feels like I've taken the opportunity I've had with content creation for granted. Like if I had just kept working at it, like yeah, I could probably be at well over 10,000 subs or whatnot. And yeah, sub numbers are just numbers at the end of the day. It's more about, loving what you do and whatnot. But I think especially like, you're responsible for a community. Like I think one of the coolest things about like, our boy Old Gravy is that like, he's like actually trying to actively build a community, and it seems like he enjoys doing that. And that's especially like as a content creator, the biggest thing you got to focus on is like, you know, building that community, and those people will keep coming back because they appreciate you for who you are. And as long as you're just, who you are at the end of the day, like the right people will come around.
I love that. All right, Yellow Hat. Before we sign off, is there any last words you wanted to say, or any promos you wanted to give for yourself?
You can of course check my stuff out when I eventually get back to that, but I do have a YouTube channel, I do have a Twitch, do have a Twitter. I think I just start getting into the short form content stuff a little bit more too, so we'll get to that.
It's fun, honestly. I don't know what it is. I feel like I actually enjoy. It's funny. I like streaming
Mhm.
because obviously I'm used to doing that so much of
Yeah.
the casting stuff,
Mhm.
and I like the short form. The in between, I kind of hate. YouTube kind of gives me such a hard time, honestly. I don't know what it
It's the
is
editing.
on the
The
mental.
editing is the big part because you're always so concerned about putting out like the best product that you could possibly make. It's like, how can I make this video better? How can I make this video better? And like, I think the thing is just understanding like, yeah, the first couple hundred videos you make are probably not going to be that great. But it's always good to try to improve one thing at a time from each video. It's like, how can I make this a little bit more interesting? Like, and then you start getting into the nerdy stuff like, how do I keep retention high? Like, oh, this was a dip in retention, like understanding all that and that side of like content creation. But I think ultimately just keeping consistent at it, that's definitely the biggest thing. But I know I'm getting off track again as I always do whenever I start yapping, but dude, a D1. Like I'm like freaking Ole Miss of yapping, or like Alabama.
You're good. You're good. I know
when it
you're a
comes to
yapper,
yapping,
Yellow
man.
Hat, but no.
You know, I mean, I've got my socials down below. You'll probably see me doing VRML stuff. And I think that's it. But thank you, man, for having me on. And it's hope to be on again in the future. But I'm excited to see who else you bring onto this podcast, man. Keep at it.
I gotta see what I can do. But thanks again, Yellow Hat, for coming on, being the first one
Yes,
to hop
sir.
on this cast. And hey, if there's anyone you think I should totally bring on and has made either some kind of movements in your own life or the VR or esports, let me know.
Will do.
Let me know. Let me know. I'm always looking for newer folks. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to field it myself. Figure out, kind of just feel like who do I think could work on this sort of thing here. But thanks again for hopping on, YellowHat, for being the first one here, and definitely still figuring out how the format and all this stuff's gonna look out. But hey, you gotta start somewhere, as you mentioned yourself, and just kind of go for it, right?
For sure.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for hopping on, YellowHat. I appreciate it.
Anytime.